From Shroud University, this is Russ Breault bringing you another discussion on the Shroud of Turin, the greatest mystery of the known world.
One of the challenges facing Shroud research is the important task of communication. But more specifically, communicating the message of the Shroud to a new generation. Many, if not most of us in this room, became interested in the subject around the time of the Shroud of Turin research project, also known as STURP, when they went to Turin in 1978 or shortly thereafter. We remember all the press, all the excitement. There was a buzz across the entire world. The original Silent Witness film came out that same year. National Geographic published a landmark article in June of 1980. STURP announced their preliminary results in 1981. Their announcement was electrifying. The Shroud image was not the work of an artist, and the blood tested positive for being genuine blood. Could the Shroud be authentic? Is that even possible? For 10 years, we rode a wave of interest that came to an abrupt stop in October of 1988 with the announcement of 3 carbon dating labs. The party was over. We are all here today because we believe there is more to the story. Unfortunately, the world does not know that story. Many thought the publication of Ray Rogers' work in 2005 challenging the carbon date would shift the tide. It didn't. In fact, during the 2006 Olympics held in Torino, as it was pronounced by the commentators, NBC made sure that the Shroud of Turin was never mentioned until the final day of the event. I can still see Katie Couric on the Today Show dismissing the Shroud as a medieval fake based on a carbon dating test and made no mention of Ray Rogers' work, even though his results were published in a peer-reviewed journal only a year before. A quick search on Google and the news team would have found numerous references. They deliberately and purposely chose to ignore it. The secular media is more comfortable with the Shroud as a fake. Ardent secularists cannot handle the possibility of its authenticity. In the 30 years since STURP, the challenge of effective communication has been further thwarted by the press and academic elites who have become even more hostile to anything religious, much less Christian. However, a larger problem today is not a biased media, but a fractured media. When STURP was making news, most people got their news through the big 3 networks, newspapers, and magazines, and that was it. Today, the influence of print media is on the wane, and digital sources of news and entertainment are almost limitless. So now we are back to the question of how can we engage and intrigue the next generation, and why is it important? The importance of this task hits on 2 levels, the pragmatic and the imperative. From the pragmatic, I have spoken to many in this room and others who lament on what to do with their personal collection of books and videos and memorabilia and personal research and writings. Their kids don't want it. If they're like my kids, they run out of the room screaming when the subject comes up. This doesn't seem to be a passion or interest that gets transferred to one's progeny. We're in desperate need of the younger generation to seek this mantle. When the young prophet Elisha desired the mantle of Elijah, he was given a double portion. Elijah didn't just hand it to him. Elisha desired it. We need to build interest and enthusiasm in a new generation that will desire the wisdom and knowledge that the older generation of researchers can offer before they leave the stage. This leads me to the imperative. The imperative is related to the most important aspect of the Shroud. It is what has drawn many to this conference. The imperative is the message. I'm not particularly interested in old linen cloths. I have little interest in other ancient artifacts or alleged relics either. But a first-century Jewish burial shroud that bears the front and back image of a 5'10" bearded crucified man covered with bloodstains that match the passion of Jesus Christ is more than just another relic. It is potentially the most important artifact on the planet. Its importance is derived from the message. What is the message? It is the message of the gospel, as described in the biblical narratives. It is the message that the very Son of God came to earth in the form of a man, humbled himself to dying on a cross in our place, and then rose from the grave, defeating the power of sin and death, and he offers that same victory to all who believe. What a message! Can there be a better message? This is the imperative. The message of the shroud is identical to the message of the gospel. In Acts chapter 1, verse 3, it says, "After his suffering, he showed himself to these men and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive." Is the shroud one of those proofs mentioned here? Maybe so. But more important is a verse in John chapter 14, verse 11, Jesus speaking, he says, quote, "Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least believe on the evidence of the miracles themselves." Now, with the use of words in Scripture like proofs and evidence, it is very clear that Jesus wanted no ambiguity regarding his resurrection, and that faith in what he had accomplished was essential. The unifying statement that defines my interest in the shroud is as follows. The significance of the shroud is related to its potential. If the shroud is potentially the burial shroud of Jesus of Nazareth, then its significance is incomprehensible. Why? Because it potentially confirms the message of God's love to every human being alive today. I think that's pretty significant. This is also why it is imperative that we continue our research and engage the next generation, because its potential and significance is far too important to allow the shroud to descend into obscurity. Towards this end, I have launched a new website called shrouduniversity.com. My goal is to take the subject and encourage college and high school students to do their own research, to incorporate the shroud into some aspect of academic study, to encourage them to consider the subject as part of a paper for history, art, or religion, to consider it as a project or presentation for science or a topic for speech. For instance, the debate between Walter Macron and blood chemist Dr. John Heller and Dr. Alan Adler would be fascinating. Here's the question. How can qualified scientists arrive at completely divergent conclusions based on the same data? Perhaps an investigation into the methodologies of the scientists would be revealing. Perhaps comparing the shroud to the Vinland map would be a good project. It is a superb parallel, where Macron says it's a fake, but other scientists claim it is authentic, that it is an authentic Viking map, including Yale University, Caltech, and the Smithsonian Institute. See any parallels? Certainly, the current debate over carbon-14 dating would need to be addressed in the light of new evidence. Perhaps incorporating the importance of sampling methodology would be significant here, assessing the wisdom of allowing the most important carbon dating event of the 20th century to hang on one questionable sample, something we've been discussing here for days. The possibilities are numerous, but we need to engage students and pique their interest first. Shroud University is broken into 10 academic schools, so those students interested in a narrowly defined aspect of the Shroud will have a ready resource. The ultimate goal of Shroud University is to speak the language of this generation, and that language is technology. The emerging generation asks 3 questions. What can I watch? This is the YouTube phenomenon. Next they ask, what can I listen to? This is the iPod phenomenon. And lastly, they say, what can I find and read on the internet? Books and magazines are becoming quaint throwbacks to a bygone era, unfortunately. This is the reality we face if we are to engage the new generation. We are making every effort to find or create as much streaming video, streaming audio, podcasts, and video blogs for this purpose. This is a work in progress. The site will continue to grow and improve in its look, functionality, and content. As an aside, it's not in the paper here. I mean, all the presentations here this weekend will end up on Shroud University. You all remember the movie Field of Dreams with the famous quote, "Build it and they will come"? Let me assure you, they will not come unless they know about it. The next phase of emphasis will be a campaign to contact every Catholic and Protestant college in the United States with a request for them to link to Shroud University as an outside academic resource. This site needs to be visible to students. The second phase of this effort would be towards campus ministries attached to secular colleges and universities. I'm under no illusion that most members of the secular academia have become ardent opponents to anything religious, especially when it steps within the bounds of science. A survey of the 1,000 members of the National Academy of Science was taken a few years ago. Regarding faith, 94% indicated that they were atheists. With that in mind, our best hope is with schools and ministries that have some kind of affinity with this subject. Now, how will this be accomplished? By me paying out of my pocket for part-time college students to make the calls and make it happen. It won't happen without effort. Donations, by the way, are accepted in the alumni section of the website. We don't want to be just visible in cyberspace. We need to be physically visible as well. And for that purpose, in the marketing section, we have created several downloadable resources, including a comprehensive fact sheet, an 11 by 17 poster, which you see hanging on the wall right there, and an 8.5 by 11 flyer. And all these should be posted in the school library, study hall, bulletin boards, dormitories, wherever enterprising students can put them. You all know the saying, out of sight, out of mind. Well, our hope is to achieve the opposite effect. We want to be within sight and top of mind. So, that's my brief intro, and what I'm going to do now is take you on a brief tour of Shroud University so you can see it in its current form.